Okay, peace to the family. In this video, we're going to be going over the argument the slave owners were already paid reparations. First, I want to, before I get into this, I want to talk about the victim poll that I did on the channel earlier. So I polled everybody. I said, do black people have a victim mindset? Okay, and the majority said no, and you had a few say yes. There was 6 votes total, but I would say black people have a victor's mindset. Right? We've been through everything that anybody could ever, any race, any atrocities a race could ever go through. We've been through that and some, and still going through it to this day. Okay, we have "It ain't over yet," says mother JPD victim buried in Popper's grave despite having an ID. Okay, this is Dexter Wade. 37-year-old man who died after being hit by a Jackson, Mississippi police SUV driven by an off-duty officer, cries as she leaves a rose on her son's coffin in Jackson. And of course, we have a history of racial injustices, a long list of mass lynchings, have racial violence in the 50s, barriers to education, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, gerrymandering, felony disenfranchisement, redlining, the Red Summer of 1919, mass killings of other people, right? Native Americans, segregationist leaders. Of course, some people believe, black people were the original Native Americans. Okay, if we're the original people, we were the original Native Americans. Prig and Pennsylvania, lynchings of labor organizers, school segregation in Alabama, Confederate iconography. We have the sharecropping that took place, Detroit uprisings that took place due to injustices. No accountability for police shootings, for profit detention centers. We have the assassination of our political leaders. Of course, we're not just having the assassination of our political leaders. We're also having the assassination of some entertainers that are making a difference behind the scenes, right? Many black leaders that make a difference, a true difference, and meet their demise somehow, right? Racial bias in the school is a proven fact that's coming out. Lots of reports coming out about how, black students are just disciplined, at a higher rate. Okay, black families severed by slavery. As I mentioned in my previous video, it was a culture to break up black families, just like it is today. I think they break people up too by vocation. You might not be able to get no job in your state, but you got to move to somebody wants to hire you, but you got to live in a whole different state in order to get hired. It's like, wow, but I got family all the way over here, right? So again, I think I'm noticing that. And so you have things like the death penalty, racial terror targeting black veterans, prosecuting children, treating children as adults. We know that more often black children treated as adults, the trauma of lynching, just the trauma of, if we're not going to talk about the past, and a lot of people like to deflect and say, don't worry about the past, as if the past doesn't affect the present. But just the thought of somebody, hitting your family member, and then you wonder if, somebody is next, right? Just the thought of, somebody pulling you over and things escalating, right? So these things can cause trauma and terror as well for those who, not even involved. We know about how a lot of young black children are being persecuted in a lot of these schools, which is why everybody recommends homeschooling, and both parties realizing that there are monetary benefits that black families can get by being able to, there's things that you cannot replace monetarily. There's monetary benefits that you can get by being able to work with another person in a relationship. The masculine and feminine energies, when they're balanced and in the home, that can be beneficial to a family. And sometimes, there are men out there that do exist that when you factor in childcare and homeschooling and the cost of doing so, some of these men are teachers and they can, help those types of situations. Still, it's best that the original family stay together, right? And that's one of the best things. And I'm going to do a report in the future about black families, because it's such a great, important thing to understand the outward, or the, the system of racism around the black family, and then inside the black family, what can we control, or what we can do to continue to better our outcomes, because we're in a competitive environment and we're falling behind. So with that being said, as we fight for reparations, what can we do to keep the peace amongst one another and continue moving forward? Because I know people, the swirling and divestment thing, I understand why people are doing it. But, to those few that see the value in having a black family and want to have a black family, what can you do? So I'm going to talk about that later. Private prisons, police shootings, it goes on and on and on. Louisiana massacre. There's a whole history of page after page after page. So yes, I would say black people are victims. I wouldn't say that we have a victim's mindset despite the negativity. Okay, yeah, we live in an environment that attempts to make us mad so they can use that as an escalation tactic to get us so angry that we lash out at each other, or we lash out at people. And that's what you're seeing with the youth. I believe these days is that youth, that they have so many different obstacles and so much anger built up. They might even have a toxic parent, right? That may tell them they're nothing, and then society goes out and treats them like nothing. So they put their best effort in and still can't get a shot, and this anger can build up, right? So there's a lot of stress factors when you start studying social dynamics that's caused a lot of the youth to become so aggressive and angry and trigger happy and things of that nature. Okay, because a lot of times I think black people just get so frustrated we just take our anger out on each other, because that's the easy way out. And actually channeling that anger into something positive that we find an interest in. Finding your interests, finding your gifts, your talents, studying your natal charts, your numerology. You can get up with me and I can give you a numerology reading, and we can go in depth over step by step, what basically you will find great happiness and success with. So I, have to lay all that out. But anyways, again, I don't believe black people have a victim's mindset. I think we have a victor's mindset in a system that victimizes us more often than not. Okay, so let's get back to this main topic. So the slave owners were already paid reparations. So argument one, based on the data. According to data from the National Archives, the United States government paid enslavers approximately $300 per enslaved person in the District of Columbia as part of the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862. However, this one-time payment only applied to the District of Columbia and did not compensate enslavers in other parts of the country. Is a primary source, that's National Archives. Argument two, based on historical fact. The payment made to enslavers under the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862 was not reparations for slavery. Instead, it was a strategic move by the Union to weaken the Confederate war effort by depriving them of labor. President Lincoln stated that the act was not intended as compensation for property loss. Argument three, based on a scholarly source. In his book, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century, economist and author Dr. William Darity argues that the payments made to enslavers under the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862 were not actually reparations, as they did not provide any compensation to the enslaved individual who had been forced to work without pay for generations. Furthermore, Dr. Darity argues that reparations should be focused on addressing the ongoing economic and social disparities Black Americans face, rather than attempting to rectify historical injustices through symbolic gestures. Argument 11, the government absolved reparations. So based on the data, reparations are still relevant today. As racial wealth disparities persist in the United States, according to a report by the Institute of Policy Studies, the median wealth of white households will be 86 times that of black families. This persistent wealth gap directly results from historical injustices, including slavery, Jim Crow laws, and the institutional failure to address them through reparations. Therefore, absolving the issue of reparations perpetuates this wealth gap and exacerbates the racial inequality. And this is the book here, The Road to Zero Wealth. Is talking about how black Americans are scheduled to go to zero wealth, the race wealth divide, middle class insecurity, how the government policies built and preserve the racial wealth divide, and so forth and so on. So the reason why, when black people made all this amazing progress, despite all of those extreme circumstances during the peak of our highest purchasing power era, that the dollar was the strongest, that was, racial lynchings and theft and murder was a culture that existed to secure, the future of other races, other nationalities. It wasn't for making an equitable society. It wasn't for any of that. Although again, I believe there's enough resources for everybody to still have a great, abundant life. Counter argument 2, based on historical fact, the government has previously acknowledged its responsibility for reparations in other contexts. For example, the United States government paid reparations to Japanese Americans intended during World War II. This precedent shows the government has the ability and responsibility to address past injustices through reparations. Therefore, absolving reparations for black Americans is inconsistent with the government's history. Counter argument based on a scholarly source, according to Ta-Nehisi Coates in his influential essay, The Case for Reparations. Reparations are necessary to address the ongoing harm caused by past injustices, which I read a little bit of Case for Reparations, actually a good essay to read. Coates argues that the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow laws, and discriminatory housing practices has created systemic inequality that cannot be addressed solely through one's individual efforts. You hear so many times, people speak about black people just need to work hard. It's clearly lazy. They just looking for another handout, yada, yada. You hear it on and on and on. And again, you with anything you pursue, you have to have some level of capital to pursue it. With black people, what I'm noticing is that, or at least from my experience, is that a lot of opportunities that we get access to, they keep you just over broke, right? So there's not much in excess that you can have. Even if, I calculated with some of the pay rates, sort of the lower income areas, some of the pay rates, even if you work 2 jobs, you would still have very, very little left over, just with the basic necessities. It's kind of structured in a way to where, if you invest and that investment fails, first of all, it takes you a lot of years to save up. And then, if that fails, you're devastated and you're probably not going to touch it again, right? But just imagine having access to hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital to be able to fail a couple times, and still, you may even start 10 businesses at once. And then you can see which one sticks, which one is a success. So the black people have never had that opportunity. He cites historical examples of successful reparations programs in the country, such as Germany's payments to Jewish Holocaust survivors. Therefore, absolving reparations ignores the scholarly research and evidence supporting their need to address past injustices. And of course, there's a long list of, reparations that was paid out. And I have a lot of great links at the bottom of the page on this special report that you can check out. I'll put these links together in alphabetical order. Argument number 12, white people died to end slavery, so get over it, right? We hear that a lot. The counter argument based on the data. So while it is historically accurate that many white individuals, including soldiers and abolitionists, played roles in the fight against slavery, this narrative can overshadow the pivotal role of enslaved black Americans themselves. The notion that the end of slavery was primarily due to white sacrifice does not account for the long history of resistance by enslaved individuals, as Franklin and Moss mentioned, in From Slavery to Freedom, in his book From Slavery to Freedom. So enslaved Black Americans and their descendants were primary agents of their liberation, frequently engaging in acts of defiance and rebellion. We know about all the slave revolts. Of course, Nat Turner is a good film if you haven't seen it yet, by Nate Parker. Of course, he faced some difficult circumstances after releasing that recent film, Birth of a Nation, a recent remake. Definitely I recommend checking that out. So these actions, along with political pressure exerted by free Black Americans, were crucial in turning public opinion against slavery and ultimately contributed to its abolition. To credit the end of slavery solely to the sacrifices of white individuals is to ignore the agency, bravery, and impact of enslaved people who fought relentlessly for their freedom and the freedom of their descendants. Counter-argument based on historical facts. So the assertion that all white individuals in history were aligned against slavery is an oversimplification that overlooks the nuanced reality of the era. Indeed, many white people actively fought to preserve the institution of slavery, and again, kudos to them. The Confederate soldiers, predominantly white, fought in the American Civil War with the primary aim of defending slavery, though. So McPherson, in the Battle Cry of Freedom, explains that Confederacy was explicitly established to protect and perpetuate the institution of slavery. Okay, so furthermore, the experiences of white abolitionists underscore the divided sentiments among white Americans regarding slavery. And of course, this is right now, today is a very divided topic. A lot of people are divided on it. Notably, figures like William Lloyd Garrison face significant hostility and danger for their anti-slavery stance, as documented by Mayer 1998 in All on Fire, William Lloyd Garrison and the Abolition of Slavery. These examples highlight that the historical context of white involvement in the abolition of slavery was complex and varied, with significant segments actively supporting the continuation of slavery. So there was an active movement here. How many times, recently we've heard things from people talking about re-enslaving Black people and stuff like that again. You got to wonder why so much effort is being put into keeping us in this state of barely making it by, right? For some of us, right? But barely making it by. Counter argument based on a scholarly source. According to historian David Blight, the idea that white people were the primary force behind the abolition of slavery is a myth. In his book, Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory, Blight argues that white Americans created a lost cause mythology after the Civil War that emphasized the heroism of white soldiers and minimized the role of Black Americans in their liberation. The mythology, he argues, has persisted to this day and continues to shape how many Americans view the history of slavery and emancipation. The case for reparations, Tariq Nasheed, and Foundational Black Americans. So according to Tariq Nasheed, Foundational Black Americans are descendants of enslaved people who survived American slavery and helped build the United States. Their history began in 1526, when enslaved Black people were brought over by Spanish colonizers and launched successful revolts, joining local Native American society. So the main argument is that Black Americans built America from the ground up, from scratch, which is in fact true. And the enslaved labor was essential to the development of the American economy, and the wealth generated by this forced labor was used to build the country's infrastructure and finance its growth. After the abolition of slavery in the United States in 1863, Black people were still denied fundamental rights and opportunities through a system of discriminatory laws and practices known as Jim Crow. These laws, which were in effect until the 1960s, enforced racial segregation and discrimination in housing, education, and employment. I believe you'll get a 10% higher response rate just by whitening your resume. So after the abolition of slavery in the United States in 1863, black people were still denied fundamental rights and opportunities through a system of discriminatory laws and practices known as Jim Crow. These laws, which were in effect until the 1960s, enforced racial segregation and discrimination in housing, education, and employment. Even after the Civil Rights Movement and the passage of laws designed to protect the rights of black people, discrimination was continued in many forms, such as redlining, police brutality, and mass incarceration. These systemic racism has had a profound effect and lasting impact on the black community. And, we need balance. So black people have had denied access to education, healthcare, and basic necessities, and have been subjected to violence and discrimination at the hands of the state and private individuals. This has resulted in the black community facing a wide range of economic and social disadvantages, such as poverty, unemployment, and a lack of access to credit, which continues to this day. This historical context is the foundation for the case of reparations for black people, as it is necessary to address the harm that has been done due to centuries of slavery and discrimination. As highlighted in our previous article, 1968 poverty still affects black people in 2023. So this is an article I had wrote. Okay, and of course we know this is covering, of course, that 1968 wealth gap, and how the reason why you highlight that as the major turning point for the civil rights era, and notice how our wealth kind of went up and went down. And when you look at home ownership rates, they've gone up and then gone back down to their previous rate in 1968. This is why Dr. Claude Anderson was speaking so much about the importance for black folks to get to do the best we possibly can, because we're scheduled to go to zero wealth, right? So reparations, of course, would play a pivotal role in making sure that we don't go to zero wealth in the nation that our ancestors built. Adjusted for inflation, middle-class black families had an average household wealth of $6,600 in 1968 compared to it was $71,000 in wealth for white median-class households. Reparations would represent the great equalizer and repair for the black community in every way possible. And the action steps for reparations for foundational black Americans, it's simple as cutting the check, really, on their end, cutting the check. While there is no one-size-fits-all solution, here's some simple action plans that could be taken to address this issue. Keep in mind that these are general guidelines and would require detailed policy development and legislative action. And this photo here just kind of depicts it all happening. This is like a nightmare for anybody who's a hardcore hater. It's like a nightmare. Black folks ruling? Yeah, because if you have the right black folks in the right position, history shows we can do it. You got to have just people, though. You got to have people who care. You got to have people who have integrity, will do the right thing even when your back is turned, right? A lot of black people today don't trust each other, and I want to touch on that factor for a moment. That's been beaten into us, and it's also a part of some hip-hop culture. You hear a lot of rappers say, don't trust nobody, don't trust nobody, don't trust nobody. And again, this is not healthy for our economic well-being, okay? If you look at the big picture, okay, it's not healthy and again, a lot of our people, though, are broken. So it's like, it's a catch-22 situation, but overall, you just have to roll with the people that are good people, want good, and have a good heart and good intent. So number one would be to establish a commission on reparations, form a government-appointed or independent commission with experts, scholars, and community leaders to study reparations. Research and documentation, so conduct an in-depth historical and economic analysis to document the impacts of slavery and discrimination. Define eligibility and calculate reparations, set clear criteria and eligibility, and develop a method for calculating reparations based on historical and contemporary disparities. Legal framework and policy development, so develop detailed policies and legal frameworks for reparations distribution, including various forms like monetary, educational grants, and housing assistance. Identify funding sources and model implementation. Determine funding sources and pilot targeted programs based on successful models like the Evanston strategy. Public awareness and support. Implement educational campaigns and engage stakeholders for broad support. Number 7, address legal and political hurdles. Overcome legal, political, and constitutional challenges aiming for bipartisan support. Implementation and oversight. Roll out the reparations program in phases and oversight committee for transparency and fairness. Evaluation, expansion, and integration. Continuously assess and adjust the program, aiming to scale it up and integrate it into national policy and educational curricula. Number 10, forming formal records and legal petitions, as exemplified by Belinda Scott Royal in 1783. Presenting a well-documented legal petition to a legislative body can be effective. A Royal's petition to Massachusetts General Assembly requested a pension from her enslaver's estate, resulted in a granted pension, demonstrating the power of legal recourse and seeking reparations. And of course, this photo here wanted to create a concept of Black people, and awesome. You see the cross breaking the chain at the top right. Got the doves out. They're like Black Jesus in the back. Got some Moors over here. Got the sister with the fro in the middle, fist to the sky. The journey toward reparations for foundational Black Americans is one paved in complexities and deep-rooted historical injustices. As we have explored, the debt owed is not only financial but also emotional and societal, spanning from the era of slavery to ongoing systemic discrimination. Addressing this issue is not just about rectifying past wrongs, but building a more equitable future for all. The case for reparations is clear, and the time to act is now. Signing petitions, actively participating in this movement, sharing this video can also help about bringing much needed change. Please share this information, engage in conversation, and encourage others to get involved in any way possible. Your voice and actions are vital in this fight for justice. I thank you for taking the time to listen to me and read and consider being part of this vital case. And again, you can check out all these cool references of all this great content you can go through if you're having doubts. And I just want to say, this Comedic Minds, I hope y'all enjoyed this video presentation. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, share. And have a wonderful month, a great time off. And I'm signing out.
Keep that in. I'm the man, all in high demand. I do what they can, you do what you can. I got hella plans, breaking rubber bands. We can't get along, and I overstand. I do. Skilly steady popping like the for the dollars. I'm too focused on the commas, and you always with the drama. Always got a problem, but it's never an issue. Way too blessed and stressed, using money like tissue. Tears of joy, every night a celebration. Hey, go deck for my dedication. I just might obliterate 2021. 2020 pandemic still going dumb. My heart been through so much shit, that bit almost numb. Still I snap on every song, so I don't snap on anyone. Go so hard I break a thumb, broke a leg in their ass. Got my foot on the gas, right hand on that. I'm the man, all in high demand. I do what they can, you do what you can. I got hella plans, breaking rubber bands. We can't get along, no.